Update 5.2 with all officially announced changes, amongst them alterations to spotting, infantry versus vehicle combat, the lunge mine, and Fliegerfaust gadgets, as well as our beloved time to kill, and the supposed release date for Wake Island, alongside the return of grind, frontlines, and outpost as part of Chapter 5. This is your week on the battlefield. Welcome to this episode of This Week on the Battlefield, the show where we cover news, updates, the community, and so much more all around the Battlefield franchise. As per usual, there's much to cover, so let's jump straight into it. In the smaller news this week, we saw a switch up in playlists being available, with Island Advance and Heat of Battle, those two Pacific-focused playlists that have accompanied us since the launch of the Pacific, being essentially merged into one, the Pacific War playlist, and Brigade Abroad, a new playlist featuring Squad Conquest on Operation Underground, Iwo Jima, and Pacific Storm, going live as well. The weekly mission is another cosmetic-focused one this week. The Resolute features mostly simple infantry and objective-focused tasks, and unlocks, upon completion of course, the Border Guard skin set for the Japanese. Next week will be relatively similarly focused on cosmetic rewards, with the weekly mission rewarding a barbed baseball bat, but more interestingly, also bringing back grind, at least for that week, a relatively decisive, but nevertheless generally quite popularly loved game mode in Battlefield 5. Then moving on to the big news, undoubtedly it's update 5.2 and the official announcement by DICE not only as to when to roughly expect it, but also the major changes or pieces of content that it will be introducing. Now first and foremost, the update will be coming towards the beginning of December, and will of course feature plenty of fixes and changes as usual for patches, but also will be bringing us private games, or RSP, or now finally, as it is supposedly officially known, community games. Now more details on this feature will be following closer to update 5.2, but given that update 5.2 is coming in December and community games is part of it, we can now safely say that private games, RSP, community games, whatever you want to call it, is coming towards the beginning of December. Also as part of update 5.2, we'll be getting, of course, Wake Island, coming in December on Conquest, Breakthrough, Squad Conquest, and Team Deathmatch. Once again, more details on this map are coming towards the end of the month, but if Temporyal's data mining is to be believed, then week 7 of Chapter 5 of Tides of War, beginning on December the 12th, will feature Wake Island focused tasks, and thus the map should launch either on the actual 12th or shortly before. Then in what is most definitely the most important piece of information and the most controversial from the 5.2 update announcement, we have time to kill changes to cover, and from what I've seen so far online, be that on Twitter, Reddit, or the forums, they're by no means popular changes to time to kill. Time to kill 3.0 or 0.5 or 2.0++, whatever you want to call it, aims to address ranged damage of weapons other than the bolt-action sniper, bolt-action carbine, and anti-material rifles to promote, supposedly, and these are DICE's words not mine, a healthier gameplay on objectives. They are treating each weapon individual as to these changes, and thus it's worth noting that the weapons provided as examples, and I will be showing them in just a moment, don't necessarily represent the entire class of weaponry, but most likely, frankly, are quite indicative of it. So the changes are overall weapon damage nerfs to their close quarter and their long range, frankly even their medium range potential. And this applies to pretty much all of the weapons, but most importantly the automatic weapons in Battlefield 5. Thus, from the examples provided, the STG will be going from a previous 4 to 6 bullet kill to a 5 to 8 bullet kill, depending on range. The MG42, previously able to down targets with 4 to 6 bullets to the body, will now need 5 to, yes, 13 bullets to take out a target. The Trench Carbine, previously limited to a 3 to 7 shot kill, will now require 4 to 9. The M1 Carbine, one of the less heavily hit of the weapons, will be going from a 4 to 5 shot kill to a 4 to 7 shot kill. And the Thompson, all too popular clearly for DICE, will be going from a 4 to 8 shot kill to a 5 to, once again, ridiculous 13 shot kill at long range. Now, if you're not convinced of how drastic of a damage nerf these changes are, let me point you not necessarily to their maximum number of bullets required to down targets at ranges at which many of these weapons, if we're honest, often don't hit their targets anyway, but instead how many shots these weapons will require some of them actually which have relatively small magazine sizes at, let's say, closer or medium ranges. The MG42, for example, not necessarily one with a small magazine, but nevertheless a weapon that was previously focused on, let's say, close to medium range combat, will be requiring not 5 but instead 9 shots at already 30 meters. Yes, that is essentially a halving of its TTK potential in what is still essentially close quarters. So much for only nerfing the long-range potential of these weapons. At 50 meters, which is good into the medium ranges, you'll be requiring 11 bullets instead of the previous 6. A similar thing can be applied to the Thompson, which at 30 meters goes from the previous 6-shot kill to a 9-shot kill, and at 50 meters goes from an already relatively tough 7-shot kill to a frankly basically unusable 11-shot kill. I should say these changes will be accompanied by changes to recoil, fire rates, and specializations to somewhat mitigate some of the damage potential loss here, but overall the picture is undeniable. We're going from a relatively fast time to kill to something that is probably one of the slowest time to kills we've had in any Battlefield game within one patch that hasn't been tested with the community whatsoever, upon which the community has not been consulted, and which will not see any kind of public outing before launch to the full game in form of a CTE update. Now, I frankly can't fully express my frustrations and also, frankly, the hypocrisy of some of these decisions without bursting into a full 20-minute rant. I'll reserve that for a separate video possibly next week. But just to point out some of the problems, besides the obvious that the community does not want this change, and they've been quite vocal about that, and DICE promised not to mess with time to kill again, following the last change to time to kill, which was very, very unpopular and needed to be reverted pretty much instantly, is that it doesn't accomplish the goal they're looking for and has detrimental effects to pretty much the entire game balance as it stands right now. Again, I will not be able to cover all these factors in today's video because this video is simply not long enough for that. But to just name a few of my personal opinions and observations, the consequences of making weapons such as the SMGs, ARs, MMGs, LMGs, and pistol carbines so range ineffective is that these weapons will not get chosen, and thus you're not improving on weapon diversity on the battlefield as much as you're simply limiting people who do not want to play exclusive close quarter, currently dominated by the SMGs and some of the ARs and LMGs, to using bolt-action carbines, bolt-action rifles, semi-autos, most likely, I haven't heard anything on those specifically, and of course the so glorious and very much loved anti-material rifles. It means that all but close quarters and close medium ranges, target distances of say 30 to 50 meters above that, will be dominated by 2 or 3 classes of weaponries, while the remaining 20 to 30, 40, 50 meters will be shared between, well, 6 different classes of weaponry that most likely will not be able to differentiate themselves properly anymore. Further, I don't think this is a good move for Battlefield 5. It was marketed as having gunplay that is fast-paced, that is balanced on the basis of recoil, and not instead spread or silly, ridiculous damage models, as Battlefield 1 was. If you agree or disagree with that, it was a relatively unpopular feature of Battlefield 1. And Battlefield 1 showed that people want faster time to kills because guess what they changed about 1 year into the game's life cycle? The time to kill. They shifted it to a slightly more aggressive, shorter model. Lastly, what I want to say here is I really don't understand how, after building so much more confidence again with the community, making things more or less right with a couple of very stable, good updates, as well as the launch of the largely great Pacific content, you now go ahead and do exactly that what the community does not want you to do once more, seemingly without any kind of justifiable reason, at least from the arguments I've seen presented so far. Just to round things off on the remaining changes that are being introduced by this update, there is an enemy acquisition icon system coming into play, where now when you're within 15 meters and you aim at a player, you will have an icon pop up above their head indicating not only their presence there, but also their class to help you easier identify your enemies. Within 5 meters of your enemy, they'll have that same icon just without the class information pop up above their head as soon as they are in your FOV. Seemingly, according to DICE, these changes are meant to help with visibility and also reduce the problems with the prone meta. DICE aiming here to make it not only easier to identify friend from foe, but also reducing the amount of time you have to spend scanning floors or dark corners and checking for enemies hiding. Then there's spotting changes that are of relevance. You will now receive a notification when you are actually spotted. This with the aim of allowing a little bit more countering of the spotting meta more directly through the use of, for example, smoke or breaking line of sight with the individual using the spotting scope. I need to point out here that this is not going to affect flanking in the same way many people have pointed out, as this only applies to spotting, not if players are actually, for example, looking at you from a distance when they're trying to shoot you while flanking. Again, this notification will only pop up when you are properly spotted by, for example, some of the scouts gadgetry that allows it to do so. And then lastly, we have some armor versus infantry changes that are relevant and need mentioning. In order to now take down tanks, there will now be a slightly more angle-based and frankly also reliable damage output on projectile-based attacks on tanks. Thus, tanks will now essentially take damage in three forms: in form of a big hit with maximum damage, which is coming from a hit from perfect angle; normal hits, which come from outside that perfect angle, which is usually actually perpendicular to the actual surface of the tank; and then there's also the ricochet hits, which will only be happening at very extreme angles of attack, specifically 30% or less. Now, how this system will work in practice is very difficult to demonstrate. If you want to read up on it, I'll have, of course, the full explanation linked down below in the description. But to summarize it as all, there will now be clearer angles at which you want to, for example, attack a tank from to maximize your damage potential as infantry target. In our Temporal Goodness section, as always, of course, to be taken with a generous helping of salt, given the data mining origins of the provided information, we have the return of popular limited time game modes, with of course Grind returning for week 4 of Tides of War, beginning on November 21st, but we also have Frontlines in week 6, starting on December 5th, and Outpost in week 9, December the 26th, supposedly also featuring Iwo Jima and Pacific Storm. Additionally, we've got some cosmetics to talk about, the Gold Leaf Epic Skin, set on of course the Type 100 SMG, and some Christmas character customization, alongside some melee weaponry of festive nature. Moving on then to our only in battlefield moments, we start this week's batch off with Ravinsky and a pretty fantastic multi-kill using his mines and a little bit of baiting of the enemy. Exodus attacks up next, helping his squad mate in a plane out by clearing the skies of the enemy threats with his tank. And lastly, we have Lord of Bahia with some true objective play over on Iwo Jima, the final objective, using a T-34 Calliope and racking up a whole load of kills. Coming to the end of this week's episode then, if you enjoyed the show, found it interesting or entertaining, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share, and of course hit me up with your feedback, suggestions, and opinions down below in the comments or over on Twitter. With all that being said, however, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next episode of This Week on the Battlefield.